Why was she so calm? 12 armed men had just stormed into a sacred cathedral during a wedding ceremony. Gasps echoed off stained glass. People screamed, a mother fainted, a father reached for a weapon he no longer carried. But the bride, Emma Claire Richardson, didn't scream, didn't flinch, didn't run. She stood at the altar, motionless, but her stillness wasn't fear. It was focus. Because behind the lace veil and flowing silk stood someone no one expected, and she was about to save 180 lives in less than 4 minutes. Emma never wanted to wear a uniform again. She'd spent years trying to bury who she used to be. But some truths don't stay buried. Some instincts never die. She used to be known by another name, Phoenix. A call sign whispered through sandstorms and radio static in the most elite corners of special operations. Emma had risen from chaos before. She'd led extraction missions behind enemy lines, survived ambush in Afghan ravines, and saved children from gunfire that wasn't supposed to be there. But the day she broke ranks to protect civilians, her career ended. "You can't serve here anymore, Richardson," the colonel had said. Avoiding her eyes, she didn't regret it. What she regretted was that she'd never told David. Today was supposed to be about love, a fresh chapter, sacred. Heart Cathedral, white roses, a string quartet echoing Pachelbel's canon. Her father, a retired Chicago detective, had tears in his eyes. Her mother could barely keep from sobbing. And David, the man she'd said yes to, stood in navy blue at the altar, grinning like a kid seeing stars. He didn't know the full story. He knew she was a veteran. He just didn't know she'd once been trained to disappear, to kill, to protect. He didn't know that the woman walking toward him in silk and sunlight had spent nights digging bullets from her vest, memorizing maps, or holding the hands of dying teammates. He didn't know about Phoenix, but he was about to find out. Emma's heels clicked softly on the marble. Her cathedral train floated behind her. 1,000 tiny details glimmered around her, candlelight catching her earrings. Dust suspended in rainbow beams from stained glass. The scent of white lilies. She reached the altar. She smiled at David, and then the massive oak doors behind them exploded open. 12 men, tactical black, face masks, gloves, weapons. One carried an AR-15, its barrel sweeping across pews like a scythe. 2 more flanked the door, covering exits with MP5s. Others spread out with Glocks and shotguns. Their leader had a voice distorted through a modulator. "Nobody move. This is business. Stay quiet. Stay still. Nobody gets hurt." Panic detonated. Guests screamed. Ducking behind pews, children cried. Some tried to crawl toward exits. Emma's mother collapsed. Her father reached instinctively for a weapon he no longer carried. "Back off, old man," the leader barked, leveling the AR-15 at Emma's father. Everyone here empties their pockets, removes their jewelry, and hands over their valuables. This is a robbery, not a massacre. Unless you make it one. Emma didn't blink. Her brain was already in a different mode. She wasn't seeing chaos. She was seeing angles, trajectories, cover points. She was assessing fields of fire, distances between shooters, lines of sight, structural vulnerabilities. Her dress, veil, and bouquet were camouflage now. 12 men, one with an AR-15, 2 MP5 South, 3 Glocks, 2 shotguns, 4 rotating between pews, overlapping fields of fire. Standard tactic. Coordinated intimidation through crowd compression and visual overwhelm. But none of them were prepared for what Emma was. David whispered, "Emma, stay calm," trying to shield her. His voice trembled. His arm reached around her, protective, but she didn't need protection. She was the protector. The leader stepped closer. His rifle casually pointed toward the front rows. "Beautiful wedding," he sneered. "Shame it has to end early." Emma didn't move. Not yet. She tracked him, 12 feet away. Weapon not at the ready. Complacent, predictable. the second. Gunman near the entrance was distracted. Bad stance, not maintaining tactical awareness. Everyone starts emptying pockets now, the leader ordered. Or we start making examples. An old man in the third row, white hair, maybe 70, struggled to rise. Panic had disoriented him. His hands fumbled with his wallet. "Move faster, Grandpa," barked one of the side gunmen, raising his Glock. That was it. Emma's training made the decision for her. She spoke calmly, her voice slicing through the chaos like a blade. "Please don't hurt him. He's just scared." The leader turned toward her. Well, the beautiful bride wants to negotiate." He grinned behind his mask. "Tell you what, princess. You hand over that rock on your finger. Maybe Grandpa lives." Emma's fingers moved, slowly, deliberately, toward the ring. But her eyes never left the layout. Every breath, every gesture was calculation. She wasn't just stalling. She was building her window. "You know what?" the leader said, stepping closer. "That dress probably cost more than most people make in a year. How about we add it to our collection?" Gasps echoed through the cathedral. A woman sobbed. Emma's father began to rise again, anger written in every line of his face. "Dad, stay down," Emma said, her voice firm. Everything paused. Even the gunman seemed unsure, and in that moment, Emma moved one step forward. Two hands, fast as thought. She grabbed the heavy brass candelabra from the altar and swung. The arc was perfect. It caught the AR-15. Knocking it upward, her knee drove into the leader's gut. He doubled over, choking. An elbow crushed the base of his skull. He dropped before he hit the floor. "Emma, what are you doing?" David cried, but she was already moving. She dropped the candelabra, caught the AR-15 before it clattered, checked the chamber, flipped to safety, and fired. One shot, center mass. The nearest Glock-wielding gunman collapsed. Panic turned to shock. The helpless bride had become something else entirely. Emma moved like she was born in the cathedral's shadows. Marble columns became cover. The altar became a fortress. Wooden pews became strategic concealment. The white silk of her dress, which should have made her a target, blurred with the light. Her every move was the result of years in desert. War zones, urban warfare drills, night raids, high-value target extractions. She wasn't reacting. She was executing. 2 more hostiles turned and opened fire. Stone splintered, candles crashed, people screamed. But Emma had already shifted positions. She used the cathedral's acoustics, echoes, misdirection, to make her footsteps sound where she wasn't. She baited them, confused them. A gunman ducked behind pews, grabbing a civilian human shield. Emma fired once. The bullet passed cleanly through the narrow gap between his shoulder and the hostage's ear. He dropped. Another man stepped into the aisle, confident. A bride couldn't be the threat, right? He never got off a shot. The guests were frozen in place. Some prayed, some sobbed, but none moved. They were watching something impossible. A woman in a white dress dismantling a coordinated assault with discipline and ferocity. "Drop your weapons," Emma shouted, voice steady. "Hands where I can see them." They didn't listen, and she didn't wait. She advanced, taking them apart one by one, but never blindly. Every trigger pull was precise. Every threat neutralized without risking civilian lives, even in combat. She honored restraint. The last 3 men saw what the others hadn't. This wasn't chaos. This was control. She was the calm at the center of a hurricane. They dropped their weapons. "We surrender." One cried out. "Don't shoot." Emma didn't lower her aim. "Face down. Hands behind your head. Now." They obeyed. Time since entry. 4 minutes, 12 seconds, 12 armed men. Neutralized. Not a single civilian casualty. The cathedral fell into silence. The heavy, shocked silence of people who had seen something they would never forget. Emma stood at the altar again, holding the rifle like it belonged there. like it had always belonged there. Her dress was dirtied now, her bouquet long forgotten. But her eyes, those emerald green eyes, were clear, focused, unafraid. She flicked the weapon to safety, set it down gently, and turned back to the people still frozen in the pews. "Is everyone okay?" she asked. No one spoke. Her father finally stood, his voice cracked. "Emma, sweetheart, how did you?" She looked at him and smiled gently. "It's a long story, Dad." She stood in white silk, surrounded by shattered glass, burning candles, and 12 disarmed men. And still, the first thing she thought was, how do I explain this? To her husband, to her parents, to herself. She could still hear the distant wail of sirens, growing louder, closing in. David hadn't moved. He was standing exactly where she'd left him, at the altar, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, still clutching the small velvet box that once held her ring, as if it could explain any of this. He'd seen her kill men. Effortlessly, Emma took one step toward him. "Emma," his voice cracked. Who are you?" That question, she'd asked it herself for years. Who am I without the uniform? Without the missions? Without the team? But the better question had always been, who am I when I can't pretend anymore? "I'm still me," she said gently. "Just more than you knew." Behind her, the gunmen lay where they'd fallen. 2 surrendered, 1 unconscious, 9 in various states of injury or shock, but none dead. She'd made sure of that, even if it meant risking herself. A small gasp came from the front row. "Emma," her mother whispered, barely able to speak. Emma turned. Patricia Richardson was standing now, her hands still trembling, tears streaking her makeup. But there was something else behind her eyes. Not fear, pride. "That's my daughter," she whispered, louder this time. "That's my brave, beautiful daughter." The crowd erupted. Applause echoed off cathedral walls, relief mixed with awe. No one seemed to know how to react, so they did the only thing that felt right. They clapped. They cried. They stood. But David was still frozen. Emma walked toward him slowly, careful not to startle him. Every step reminded her of what she had just revealed. Every echo of her heels whispered, he didn't sign up for this. He didn't know. She stopped in front of him. "I was going to tell you," she said softly, "before the wedding, but I didn't want to ruin something pure." "You're not ruined," he said, barely audible. "Just different." The sirens were deafening now. Flashing red and blue spilled through the stained glass windows, bathing everything in a surreal glow. Heavy boots pounded outside. The front doors, the ones that had been blasted open just minutes ago, burst open again, but this time it was uniforms, Chicago PD, tactical gear, weapons drawn. The lead officer barked orders. "Nobody move. Hands up." Emma raised her hands calmly. "I'm not a threat," she said. "Suspects are disarmed. 4 surrendered. No civilian injuries. Who the hell are you?" The officer asked, looking around in disbelief. Before Emma could answer, her father stepped forward. "That would be the bride," he said simply. She handled it. The officer, a woman in her 40s with a shaved head and sharp eyes, looked between Emma and the chaos. 12 armed men, neutralized by 1 person? "Are you joking?" "She's not," Detective Richardson said, "and neither am I." The officer stepped forward, lowering her weapon slightly. "Name?" "Emma Claire Mitchell," Emma said, glancing at David. "As of about 15 minutes ago." "Background?" Emma hesitated. The pause was brief, but the weight of it was heavy. Then she said it. 5 years. Special Operations call sign. Phoenix. The officer blinked, then again. Wait. Phoenix? From Operation Red Echo? Emma didn't respond. She didn't need to. "Jesus," the officer muttered. "They teach your tactics at Quantico." Behind her, Other officers were zip-tying the surviving suspects, checking pulses, clearing the perimeter. One younger officer stopped mid-step and turned to stare at Emma like she was a myth made real. But Emma didn't care about the officers, or the applause, or the headlines she could already feel forming. She looked at David. "I should have told you," she whispered. "I just wanted to be normal with you." David stepped forward. "I don't need normal. Emma, I need you. All of you. Even the parts I didn't know existed." Emma exhaled slowly. A breath she didn't realize she'd been holding since the moment the doors blew open. Father O'Connor cleared his throat. If we're not all going to die," he said, voice trembling, "should we, perhaps, finish the ceremony?" The congregation laughed, breathless, giddy, grateful. Someone called out from the back, "Yes, finish the wedding." Emma looked around. It wasn't how she'd imagined this day would go, but maybe, just maybe, it was how it needed to go. She turned back to David. "Are you sure?" David nodded. "You saved everyone I love. You saved me. You've already made me proud to call you my wife." Tears welled in her eyes for the first time that day, and not from fear, not from combat, but from something far more terrifying. Acceptance. They returned to the altar, and with shattered glass and sirens as their witness, they said their vows. Emma didn't remember every word, but she remembered how his hand shook when he held hers. She remembered how he looked at her. Not like someone afraid, but like someone who had just discovered treasure in plain sight. The kiss was quiet, but the cathedral roared. Cameras flashed. Guests wept. Even a few officers clapped, unsure if they were violating protocol. The danger was over, but the story wasn't. As the newlyweds stepped away from the altar, a familiar voice called out. "Emma." She turned. Standing near the doors, flanked by uniformed officers, was a man in decorated military dress. She froze. Colonel James Harrison, her former commanding officer, the one who'd ended her career, the man who'd looked her in the eyes 6 years ago and said, "You disobeyed orders. We're processing your discharge. What are you doing here?" She asked, voice cool. "I came to apologize," he said simply. Emma narrowed her eyes. 6 years too late. "I know," he said. "But I also came with an offer." She said nothing, just stared. "The Army wants you back, not on the front lines, but as a civilian contractor, tactical consultant. You train the next generation. On your terms." Emma looked at David. He nodded slowly. "If it's what you want," Emma turned back to Harrison, "I'll consider it." "That's all we can ask." He paused. "And Emma, what you did today, that was service, whether you wore a uniform or not." She watched him leave. The same man who once dismissed her for breaking protocol, now offering her a place to shape the future. Everything had changed, and yet, maybe she hadn't. She was still the girl who jumped into danger without hesitation. Still the woman who couldn't watch an innocent die. Still the daughter who carried her father's moral code. Still the wife who wanted a quiet life, but couldn't ignore the world when it cried for help. Later that night, in their hotel suite, after the guests had gone and the news vans had left, Emma stood alone at the window. Below, Chicago glittered in streetlight reflections. David came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just processing. Any regrets?" Emma thought about it. "I regret not telling you sooner, but I don't regret who I am." He kissed her temple. "I don't either." She looked out the window again. There were stories she hadn't told, scars he hadn't seen, battles she still fought, some internal, some not. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to hide. She wasn't just Phoenix. She wasn't just Emma. She was both. She looked in the mirror, not at her face, but beyond it, at the woman staring back. The wedding dress was hanging now, cleaned, folded, stored. The silk that had danced through a battlefield barely hours earlier now hung like a memory, a reminder. Emma. Claire Mitchell, former Special Forces, newlywed, legend in tactical circles, mystery to most, and until yesterday, a secret even to the man who now lay asleep just a few feet away. David had accepted her past. He'd looked her in the eye and told her he loved all of her, the soldier and the soul. But Emma couldn't shake one thought. Now that the world knows. What happens next? She wasn't used to being seen. Not really. Her life had been one of shadows, of silence, of blurred lines. Now, her face was in the paper. Bride neutralizes 12 gunmen at own wedding. Ex-Special Forces operative saves 180 lives. Some of the headlines made her sound like a superhero. Others, like a threat. She was neither. She was just someone who had made a decision, one that had forced her past into the spotlight. David stirred behind her. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Voice groggy, Emma shook her head. "Too many thoughts." He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "You want to talk about it?" She paused. "Do you still trust me?" David looked at her like the question hurt. "Emma, you saved everyone I love. That doesn't earn less trust. That's the definition of trust." She looked away, blinking fast. I spent years burying this part of myself, and now it's out. There's no going back." "Good," he said simply, "because maybe it's time you stopped hiding." The next morning, they sat in the airport, waiting for their flight to Hawaii, a honeymoon planned in joy, now wrapped in notoriety. Across the terminal, passengers stared, whispered, pointed. Some approached for photos, others simply nodded with solemn respect. Emma kept her head down. She hated the attention. She hadn't done it for applause. She'd done it because no one else could have or would have in time. A young girl walked up, no more than 10, clutching a folded newspaper. "Are you the bride?" she asked, wide-eyed. Emma hesitated. David smiled. "She is." The girl held up the paper. "Can you sign it?" Emma took the pen slowly. She didn't want to be famous, but she also didn't want to make the girl feel small. She signed her name. Carefully, neatly, the girl looked up. "Are you a hero?" Emma met her gaze. "I'm just someone who didn't want people to get hurt." The girl smiled, then ran back to her mother. Emma sat back in the airport chair. What if this never goes? "Away?" she whispered. The questions, the cameras, the expectations. David took her hand. "Then we face it, together." Their plane lifted off an hour later, and for a brief moment, Emma allowed herself to breathe. No gunfire, no orders, no eyes. Just clouds, wind, and the man beside her who didn't flinch when she showed him her full story. But even at 30,000 feet, peace has a time limit, because the past rarely stays quiet. 2 days into their honeymoon, while watching the sun set over the Pacific, their hotel room phone rang. Emma answered. "Mrs. Mitchell?" The voice said, "Yes, this is Colonel Harrison. I know it's not the time, but something's come up." Emma tensed. "What is it?" "There's chatter," he said. "Online, encrypted forums. Some of the men at the cathedral. They weren't just robbers. At least 3 are now confirmed affiliates of a private militia group. Radicalized, domestic." Emma's blood ran cold. "Why were they at my wedding?" "We don't know, but you stopped something much larger than a robbery." Emma looked out at the ocean. "Are you saying I have a target on my back?" "No," Harrison said. "I'm saying you might have disrupted a planned operation. We think someone was watching, and now they know who you are." Emma closed her eyes. Of course it wasn't over. "I'm coming home," she said. David was already standing behind her. He could tell from her voice. Everything had changed again. They cut the honeymoon short by the time they landed in Chicago. Emma's phone had been wiped and replaced. Her security settings updated. Harrison met them personally at a quiet military office near O'Hare. Not a base. A black site repurposed for civilian coordination. "We flagged chatter from 4 states," he said, laying out documents. The group calls itself Vultures. Wing, ex-military, rogue operators. Your name came up in internal threads. They call you a traitor. Because I stopped their plan? Emma asked. Because you exposed their network. They thought they were invisible. But now... Phoenix is back. Emma exhaled slowly. I'm not back. You are now. She didn't argue. Because she knew he was right. But there was something deeper in her chest now. Not adrenaline. Not fear. Guilt. David sat beside her, quiet, watching her absorb it all. Emma finally turned to him. This isn't the life you married into. David didn't blink. I married you. This is part of you. That doesn't scare me, but it should, she whispered. No, he said. It scares them. That's why they're coming after you. The next few days were a blur. Security upgrades, briefings, strategic assessments, and then the offer, not from Harrison this time, from Homeland. They wanted her to lead a task group. Not full-time, civilian status, consulting only. Emma could train agents, help decode extremist strategy, advise tactical response teams. I'm not sure. I want to go back to any of this, she told Harrison. You already did, he said. The moment you picked up that rifle. And he was right. But this time, it wouldn't be about command. It would be about preparation. Emma could teach them. How to think, how to read a room in seconds, how to disarm a killer without hesitation or cruelty, how to save lives without losing your soul. She stared at the offer sheet that night, sitting alone in her apartment while David cooked in the kitchen. 5 years ago, the military let her go. Now, the country wanted her back. She didn't answer that night. But she knew what her answer would be. She just needed to make peace with one thing first. The next morning, she visited a grave. Not military, civilian, a child's. One of the few she hadn't been able to save. Her last mission overseas, a village. Caught in the crossfire, she'd saved 15, but not all of them. She stood at the headstone for a long time. No flowers, no tears, just quiet. I promised I'd do better, she whispered. I still promise. Behind her, a soft crunch of gravel. David stood quietly, holding her coat. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. She took his hand, and together they left the graveyard. Not with sadness, but with resolve. Emma wasn't running anymore. She was walking forward, as herself, all of her. Why was she hesitating? She had faced insurgents, cleared compounds, disarmed bombs with seconds to spare. But this simple hallway in a federal training facility felt heavier than any battlefield. At the end of that hall stood a classroom. 10 new operatives, fresh eyes, clean slates, waiting to be trained by someone they'd heard of in whispers. Phoenix? Some didn't even know she was real. Emma stood still, not from fear, from conflict. Could she teach them what they needed without handing over the weight that came with it? Could she show them how to walk into darkness without leaving pieces of themselves behind? Mrs. Mitchell? A voice came from behind. Emma turned. A young woman in Homeland tactical gear, barely out of academy. I just wanted to say, it's an honor. Emma gave a soft smile. Thank you, but call me Emma. The girl beamed. Yes, ma'am. Emma watched her disappear into another wing, then finally stepped forward. The classroom went quiet the moment she entered. 10 trainees. All eyes on her. A few stood instinctively, like they were in the presence of royalty. Emma didn't acknowledge it. She didn't want reverence. She wanted readiness. Sit, she said. They obeyed. She dropped a duffel bag onto the front desk and unzipped it. No slides, no diagrams, just tools. A Glock, a laser pointer, a crumpled map, and a half-empty MRE pouch. Who can tell me what these have in common? She asked. Silence. A tall recruit with a buzz cut raised his hand. Tactical assets? Emma shook her head. They're all useless. If your mind isn't sharp enough to use them. She walked slowly along the front of the room. Combat isn't about weapons. It's about seconds, instinct, control. You don't rise in chaos. You prepare for it. She paused. And when you do, you make decisions that most people couldn't live with. Another silence. Deeper now. Not fear. Respect. Emma nodded. Class begins now. She taught for the next 3 hours straight. Not from slides, from memory, from scars, from failure. She told them about misjudging angles under stress, about a soldier who panicked and fired into the dark, hitting a civilian instead of a combatant. She didn't say it'd been her partner. She didn't say the man never recovered, but they understood. When the class ended, most stayed behind, quiet, processing. Only one approached, a woman, late 20s, steady gaze. Permission to speak freely? She asked. Always, Emma replied. Do you believe in it? What we're doing? Preparing for enemies who might never come? Emma didn't answer right away. I believe in protecting people who can't protect themselves, she said. The threats aren't always visible, but when they come, they're not interested in fairness, only chaos. The woman nodded. That's enough for me. She walked away. Emma stood alone in the echoing room. She had been a shadow for so long, a name in reports, a ghost in debriefings. Now she was flesh and blood again. But with it came memory, and memory carried weight. That night she dreamed of the wedding, but not how it happened. In the dream, she hesitated, and people died. David fell. Her mother screamed. Her father tried to fight but was gunned down. She couldn't move, couldn't reach the candelabra. Her body wouldn't respond. Her mind locked when she woke. Her skin was cold with sweat. David stirred beside her. Same dream? She nodded. I keep seeing it go wrong. David sat up, took her hand. You did everything right. Emma shook her head. That's not how trauma works. He didn't try to fix it. He just held her, and in the silence, Emma understood something deeper. You can survive war, but surviving yourself takes longer. Days passed. Emma trained more classes. Recruits came and went, but the whispers stayed. She's Phoenix. She's the one from Chicago. She dropped 12 men in the wedding dress. It made her uncomfortable, but not for the reasons they thought. They saw the glory. She remembered the aftermath. The way her hands trembled when she finally put the rifle down. The moment she scanned the crowd, praying no one was dead. The look in David's eyes, awe and confusion. The silence afterward, the adrenaline gave way to grief. Not because she regretted what she did, but because she knew it would never leave her. She could never again pretend she was only Emma Mitchell, wife, woman, teacher. She was also Phoenix, whether she wanted to be or not. 2 weeks after the wedding, she received a package. No return address, plain envelope. She opened it carefully, gloves on, controlled environment, just in case. Inside was a single photo, grainy, black and white. Surveillance quality, it was her, standing on the balcony of the hotel in Hawaii, looking out at the ocean, alone. On the back of the photo was a note, handwritten in red ink. You're not invisible anymore. She froze, breath locked. David walked in a moment later and saw her expression. What is it? Emma handed him the photo. His jaw tightened. You think it's them? Vulture's wing? Emma didn't answer. She didn't have to. They weren't just watching. They were reminding her. You were one of us once. Now you're a target that night. Homeland ran facial recognition scans. Emma submitted the photo to classified intel servers. No hits, which was because it meant whoever sent it knew how to avoid detection. She requested temporary protection detail, not for herself. For David, he didn't argue. I'm not scared of them, he said. I am, she whispered, because I've seen what they're capable of. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she wrote a letter to her parents, a sealed note for David, instructions for Homeland, just in case, because that's what operators do. They plan for failure, even when they hope. For peace, Emma spent the next week building mental war rooms. She walked her apartment like it was a mission site. Entry points, blind spots, panic buttons. She trained in the gym harder than she had in months, recalibrated her muscle memory, rechecked her draw times, reassembled a Glock blindfolded in 30 seconds flat. David watched quietly, never interrupting, but one night, after she came in from a rain-soaked run, he said softly, "Do you think it's inevitable?" "What?" she asked, wiping sweat from her face. "That they'll come for us again." Emma paused. "I think they already are." That weekend, she received a call from Lieutenant Sarah Chun, the tactical officer who'd first arrived at the cathedral. "You were right," Chun said. "We tracked a shipment of stolen arms. Same group. They're planning something big. We intercepted a map with 3 cities marked. One of them is Chicago." Emma gripped the phone tighter. "What? Are you asking me?" Chun didn't hesitate. "We want you in the field. Not leading, not frontline. Just embedded, eyes and instincts." Emma closed her eyes. The war was calling again. But this time, it wasn't for glory. It was for something deeper to protect. The peace she'd finally found. To defend the love she never thought she'd deserve. And to prove, once and for all, that the uniform never made her a warrior. She always had been. Why did it feel like she was returning to the front lines, when she'd never left them? Emma sat in the back of an unmarked SUV, flanked by 2 agents in black tactical jackets. Chicago blurred past the windows, tall glass, old stone, the city breathing like nothing had changed, but everything had. The brief from Lieutenant Chun had been clear. 3 cities, 1 cell, 12 suspects, stolen military-grade weapons, digital trails linking the suspects to militia rhetoric, paramilitary training, and encrypted forums celebrating the fall of Phoenix. They weren't just planning another attack. They were planning it for her. "Target is on site," one of the agents said, tapping his earpiece. "Warehouse perimeter is quiet. Heat." Signatures inside confirm 4 individuals. Emma stared out the window. Joe said, 4, not 12. But the number didn't matter. It only took one with the right weapon to destroy everything. The car pulled into an alley behind the old warehouse, rusted siding, broken skylights, boarded lower windows. Emma didn't speak. She stepped out, fitted the comms unit in her ear, and checked her sidearm with familiar calm. The Homeland team had wanted her on Overwatch. She'd refused. "Observation is for people who want to feel safe," she told Chun. "I'm not here to feel anything. I'm here to end this." Chun hadn't argued. Emma moved like a whisper through the shadows, slipping in through a broken utility door. Inside, the air was thick with oil, rust, and rot. Pallets of crates, scattered documents, industrial lights flickering. She listened. 2 voices, back left, one pacing, one seated. Soft music playing from a speaker. She crept forward, her feet. Found silence instinctively, each step mapped by muscle memory born in desert compounds and ruined cities. "Shipment's late," one voice muttered. "Doesn't matter," said the other. "Phoenix is in the city. Timing's perfect." Emma froze behind a steel column. They were talking about her casually, like she was prey, like she wasn't already in the room. She exhaled once, focused, then moved, quick, surgical. The first man never saw her coming. She slammed his head into the crate edge before he could turn. The second lunged for a weapon, but her sidearm was already up. One shot, clean through the thigh, non-lethal, disabling. He screamed, dropped. She closed the gap, pressed her knee to his chest, and said calmly, "Who sent you?" He spit blood, laughed. "You're already too late." Emma didn't blink. "Too late for what?" He grinned wider. "They're watching you right now," her cum crackled. "Emma." Chun's voice came through, tense. "We've got a problem. Our surveillance on your apartment. It just went dark." Emma's stomach dropped. David. She didn't wait for clearance, didn't wait for backup, didn't wait to breathe. She was already out of the warehouse before the suspect's screams faded. She drove without sirens, without headlights. Her fingers trembled only once, when she imagined walking into her home and finding silence. Again, because this wasn't a mission anymore. It was personal. She and David had moved twice already, changed routines, avoided patterns, but threats. Like this didn't care about logic. They only cared about leverage. The moment she burst through the apartment door, weapon raised, she heard it. A voice, low, smooth, calculated. David was tied to a chair, unharmed, but not alone. A man stood behind him, unmasked, calm, wearing a pressed jacket and leather gloves. He looked at Emma like he'd been waiting his whole life to meet her. "Finally," he said. "The infamous Phoenix." Emma didn't lower her weapon. "I've ended men for less than this. I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to talk." A bad way to start a conversation. David's eyes locked with hers. No panic. Just trust. Trust that Emma would solve this, as she always had. The man stepped slightly aside, his hands raised. No weapon, no bomb, just a message. Then, "Deliver it fast," he smiled. "You disrupted our plans, made quite a name for yourself. But the people I work with, they don't like ghosts who become saints." Emma didn't speak. "They want to make an example." He continued, "You took down 12 men, saved lives, good for you. But now everyone's watching you. They're inspired, dangerous thing. Inspiration, especially in a woman trained to kill." "I don't inspire," Emma said. "I protect." The man's smile faded. "You think protection wins wars?" She took one step closer. "I think men like you use fear to justify power. But you're just cowards behind causes." Something in her voice changed the room. The man blinked, then, surprisingly, nodded. "Maybe you're right," he said. "But this isn't the end. It's the first chapter. You're not the hero. You're the warning." He turned to leave. Emma moved like lightning, closing the gap, slamming him into the wall, forearm to throat. "You don't walk out," she whispered. "Not from my home." But David's voice cut through her rage. "Emma, let him go." She didn't move. "Emma, you won." She looked into the man's eyes. He didn't flinch, but he was afraid. She released him slowly. He stepped back, straightened his jacket, and left without another word. David was quiet as she untied him. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine. They didn't touch me." Emma sat beside him on the floor, breath shallow. She felt something heavy inside her shift. Not fear, not anger, guilt. "I brought this here," she whispered. "No," David said. "They brought this here. You stopped it." Her hands were trembling now, but he reached for them. "You're not alone in this," he said. "Not anymore." That night she sat on the balcony again, this time armed and sleepless. Chun called. "Around 3, I'm everything okay?" she asked. Emma stared into the dark. "I don't know what peace looks like anymore. You and me both." They were silent for a moment. Then Chun added, "He's right, you know." "Who?" "Your husband. You stopped it. You're not at war. Not really. You're just—" reminding them that silence has a voice. Emma smiled faintly. That's exactly what it felt like. She wasn't the loudest or the most ruthless, but when the time came, she acted, not out of revenge or pride, but because someone had to, and sometimes no one else would. The next day, she returned to the training facility. She didn't speak for the first few minutes, just watched the recruits sparring in pairs. They were younger than her, faster, hungrier, but not wiser. She stepped onto the mat. "Two of you now." They stared, then stepped forward. She dismantled them both in under 40 seconds, not with brutality, with precision. When they lay panting on the mat, she offered them each a hand. "This is how you fight," she said, without ego, without rage, without needing to prove anything. She looked around the room. Because the people you protect won't care how many fights you've won. They'll only care that you stood between them and danger, when no one else would. And in that silence, every one of them understood who she was. Not Phoenix, not just a myth, not just a headline. She was what they hoped to be. Why had the files been deleted? Emma stared at the Homeland database screen, her eyes narrowing. The encrypted threat assessments, the ones tied to Vulture's wing, to the warehouse takedown, to the man who stood behind David with no weapon and too many words, were gone. No trace, no logs, just gone. She turned to Lieutenant Chun. Who authorized this? Chun looked just as confused. No one. This server is black-level access. You, me, and 2 federal clearance holders. Then someone's in the system, or someone is the system. Chun said they both knew what that meant. Someone with clearance high enough to scrub threat intel was protecting Vulture's wing, or worse, directing them. Emma felt a chill crawl up her spine. It was no longer about a wedding ambush, or her reputation, or even revenge. This was organized, funded, and it was growing. She walked out of the Homeland building with her phone already. To her ear, David picked up on the second ring. "Hey," he said softly. "Pack a bag, 1 day's worth. Don't tell anyone where you're going." He didn't question her. He never did. She heard drawers opening, a quiet zipper, and then, done. "Where am I going?" Emma closed her eyes for a moment. "There's a cabin in Michigan, under the name Claire Richardson. You'll be off-grid. There's a satellite phone inside. Call me at 0800 every morning. No text, no internet." "Emma, I'm not asking," she said, more forcefully than she intended. He paused. "Okay," he said. "I'll go. But come with me." "I can't." "You can." Emma's voice broke. "I won't put you in my shadow again." He was gone by sunset. Emma stood at the curb, watching his car disappear into Chicago's evening haze. Her hands were in her jacket pockets, but she could still feel the phantom weight of his hand in hers. This wasn't abandonment. This was protection. But it still hurt like betrayal. Later that night, she met with Colonel Harrison, not in an office, not on a call, but at an unlisted airfield west of the city. 2 former covert operatives, standing under the cold orange floodlights near a private hangar, speaking like old ghosts forced back into flesh. "There's someone shielding Vulture's wing," Emma said. "High level, deep enough to erase records in a closed homeland system." "I know," Harrison said. Emma stared at him. "You knew?" "I suspected," he replied. "But there's no proof. You're not looking hard enough." "I'm not allowed to," he said quietly. "This goes beyond command structure. I'm talking senators, contractors, black budget operations." Emma clenched her jaw. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because once you know," Harrison said, "you don't sleep, you don't trust, you don't live, you survive." She shook her head. "I've already survived. That's not the point anymore." He looked at her. There was sadness in his eyes, something like guilt. "They'll come after you again," he said. "Harder, smarter, and you'll be alone." "I'm never alone," she said. And for the first time, she believed it. The next morning, Emma met Chun on the rooftop of a federal building. They drank bad coffee from paper cups while watching the city stretch into light. "There's something you should see," Chun said. She handed Emma a manila folder. Inside were photos, blurry surveillance stills, grainy outlines of men entering and exiting a private residence on the edge of the city, expensive cars, unregistered tags, military body language, too sharp, too synchronized, and one face, just one, barely visible under a hood. Emma's pulse slowed. "I know him." Chun raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Dominic Vance. Name's not in our system." "It wouldn't be," Emma said. "He was Spec Ops." Deep, unacknowledged. Chun leaned forward. "Yours?" Emma shook her head. "Worse, he was one of theirs." "KIA?" Emma nodded. "He disappeared after a black site went dark in Syria. I thought he was dead. Looks like he's not." Emma ran her fingers along the edge of the photo. Vance had been a myth, a ghost operator, brilliant, ruthless, until something broke in him. Now he was walking in daylight again, and he was working with Vulture's wing. The dots began to connect. Vance knew the same playbook Emma did, only now he was writing new rules. She needed more than instincts. She needed a team, and she knew exactly who to call within 24 hours. 3 people stood in a dimly lit garage on the south side, all former operatives. None clean, all loyal to her. Cam Torres, close quarters specialist, kicked out of Delta Force for disciplinary disagreements. Translation: he didn't like being told not to rescue civilians. Marina Okafor, Intel Ghost, once cracked the foreign network with just a flash drive and a cup of hotel coffee. Hunted by 3 governments, Emma trusted her with her life. And Ray Navarro, her old spotter. Silent, fast, deadly. Hadn't spoken more than 5 words at a time since their last tour. But those words always counted. They didn't ask questions. They just nodded. Emma handed each of them a dossier. "I'm not building a strike team," she said. "This isn't vengeance. This is extraction. Information only. We find the leak. We expose it. Clean. Clear. Precise. Non-lethal?" Cam asked. Emma looked at him. "If possible." He grinned. "Good enough." The operation was codenamed Whisperback. 1 week, 3 targets, infiltration. Interrogation, no press, no casualties, no mistakes. The more they dug, the uglier it got. Vultures. Wing wasn't just a rogue militia. It was infrastructure. Security firms, political donors, private wargame think tanks. Training contracts masked as domestic defense. And behind them all, a shadow network funneling funds and protection. Emma stared at the last file, at the name at the top of it, a familiar name. Someone she'd once called a friend. She didn't sleep that night, just sat by the window of a safe house loft, her Glock beside her coffee mug, watching the city blink. In silence, Vance wasn't building an army. He was building a new version of order, one where men like her, and women like her, were eliminated before they could warn the world. And someone inside the government was helping him do it. The question wasn't if they'd strike again. The question was, would she be ready when they did? Why did it feel wrong before anything went wrong? Emma crouched on the rooftop of an abandoned train station just outside Milwaukee, the first confirmed Vulture's wing hub. It was dark, cold, and still. Her hands gripped a scope like they had 1,000 times, but something inside her felt off. Ray was 2 blocks away, watching from a second rooftop. Marina sat in a dark SUV, plugged into a laptop, ghosting local surveillance feeds. Cam was positioned near the back alley, suppressor ready, breathing steady through comms. It was quiet, too. Quiet. "Thermal show 4, Marina said through earpiece. "Static, no patrol rotation, no lookout. Not their usual." Emma frowned. "Could be a decoy or a trap," Ray murmured. "First words in 2 hours." Emma scanned the rooftop. Gut instinct screamed louder than her training. "Abort?" "Negative," she said. "We move fast and clean. No engagement unless threatened. This is recon, not war." She gave the signal. Cam moved first. Then Ray. Emma followed, slipping through a broken side door into the shadows of the station's gutted interior. Decay clung to the walls, spray-painted militia tags, the smell of oil, sweat, something acidic. She found the first room. 4 men, sleeping bags, no weapons within reach, and a 5th, older, sitting with a laptop. Typing fast, Emma signaled, "Ray." And Cam stormed in. The suspects dropped without resistance. No shots fired, no injuries. The man at the laptop tried to pull the hard drive. Emma grabbed his wrist, yanked the cable, and slammed the lid shut. "Don't touch it," she snapped. "Navarro, bag it." Ray secured the device. Emma turned to the man, crouching down, voice low. "Who's your handler?" He smiled, not nervous, calm, like he knew her. "You shouldn't have come, Phoenix." She froze. "Who told you that name?" But he only smiled. And then the wall exploded, Emma's ears rang with white noise. Dust and debris clouded her vision. The shockwave had slammed her against a steel beam. Her shoulder screamed with pain. Her sidearm was gone, through the smoke. She heard shouting. Cam's voice, distorted, wounded. EMA. It's a trap. Gunfire, automatic, close. Ray fired 2 shots. Precise, then silence. Emma dragged herself behind cover. Blood in her mouth, static in her ears. Marina. She croaked into comms. Where are they? No response. She crawled forward, vision sharpening. The suspect was gone. The hard drive, gone. Ray was down. Unmoving, Cam was slumped against a crate. Breathing heavy, bleeding from the side, she scanned for targets. None visible, but someone had known they were coming. Someone had planned it. Marina, she whispered. Come in. Finally. Static. Then, Emma, get out. You were burned. Emma's heart stopped. What do you mean? I traced the signal that triggered the detonation. It wasn't local. It came from inside the Homeland server. Emma's blood turned to ice. Someone inside fed them our location. Marina's voice cracked. They knew your movements. Your team layout. They knew you'd be here. Emma's fingers curled into a fist. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was an execution attempt. And someone had sacrificed 3 American operatives to send her a message. She refused to leave Ree's body behind. Cam protested, weak but alive. They'll be watching. Let them. She said. She carried Ray out herself. 30 minutes later, she stood over his body in a Chicago safe house, silent, steady, but inside. Broken. He didn't talk much, she whispered, but he never hesitated. Not once, Cam nodded. He didn't need words, he just moved. Marina handed Emma a folder. This was on a mirrored server. Emma flipped it open. Photos, emails, schematic. Layouts, one stamped with a federal watermark, one labeled Operation Rebirth. Below it, a file name, Phoenix Termination Directive. Emma stared at it, and everything inside her went still. Somebody greenlit my death. She said it hours later in a debrief with Harrison and Chun. The words felt mechanical, like she was reading a headline about someone else. Harrison looked pale. Chun just whispered, We need to find. Out who? Emma stood. No, she said. I need to. Chun reached for her arm. Emma, that's not. I have one mission left, she said, fire behind her eyes. And I finish what I start. She left before they could stop her that night. She met David, not in person, but on a secure satellite call. He was standing outside the cabin, trees swaying behind him. His breath misted in the cold. He smiled when he saw her, but she didn't smile back. Someone tried to kill me, she said flatly. Not a rogue cell, not radicals, someone with clearance in our own system. His face tightened. I'm coming back. No, she said, not yet. I'm not going to hide while you're not hiding. You're surviving, and right now, I need to know you're out of reach. David stepped closer to the screen. You can't fight this alone, Emma. She met his gaze. I was trained to. That doesn't mean you have to. She blinked hard. This wasn't the mission she wanted. It was the one she had left, not glory, not orders, just justice. Ree's silence haunted her. Cam's injuries bled guilt into every breath, and somewhere out there, Vance was moving pieces across a board only she could see. And the next target wouldn't be her. It would be the people she once swore to protect. The final piece came from Marina. She called just before dawn. I decrypted the copy drive. She said, The next event, it's not an attack. It's a false flag. Emma froze. What kind? Explosives inside a federal building, blamed on a rival group, enough to trigger a national emergency. Emma's stomach turned, and vultures wing. They'll swoop in after, claim order, offer security contracts to the government. They'll make millions and control deployment. Emma's jaw clenched. Where? D.C. When? Marina hesitated. 3 days. Emma stared out the window. Sunrise was breaking, but something inside her said the light was a lie. She had 72 hours, one final mission. No command, no backup, just her name, her training, and whatever strength she had left. Why was it always the quiet moments that felt the loudest? Emma stood on the roof of a government building in D.C., watching morning fog curl along the concrete. Streetlights flickered below. Civilians hurried to work, unaware of the countdown ticking beneath their city. She had 37 hours. That's how long until Vulture's wing would trigger their false flag attack, a staged bombing meant to frame another group, spark panic, and hand them power in the form of federal contracts and martial law. Emma had seen this strategy before. Overseas, in failed states. Now it was here. Home, she wasn't wearing tactical gear. Just black jeans, a windbreaker, and a sidearm. No team, no chain of command. Just her, and the weight of every step that had brought her to this roof. She remembered Ree's silence, Cam's blood, Marina's tears when they decrypted the final location. This wasn't a mission anymore. It was Judgment Day. Emma infiltrated the staging site 12 hours before detonation. Marina's intel had been precise. A renovated construction zone with federal access credentials. On paper, it was a Homeland Security contractor storing seismic equipment. In reality, plastic explosives, a pressure trigger system, and 3 armed operators disguised as engineers. Emma watched them through a ventilation shaft. They moved like soldiers, too clean, too synchronized. They'd been trained the same way she had, and that made them predictable. She waited until the third man separated, checking wiring in the far chamber, then dropped. 2 seconds later, he was unconscious. The other 2 went down fast. No kills, just efficiency. She didn't speak as she zip-tied their hands and gagged them. No warnings, no questions. This wasn't about them. It was about who sent them. The trigger mechanism was complex, layered fail-safes, trip sensors, remote dead switch. Emma sat beside the device for nearly 2 hours, disarming it wire by wire. Every move could have been her last. Every circuit could have killed half a city block. She worked in silence. Only the hum of electric current reminded her she was still alive. When the final node clicked free, the charge went inert. She didn't smile. She just sat back, breathing hard, staring at the device. This was how it ended. Not with a firefight, not with glory, but with quiet hands, steady breath, and a refusal to let evil hide in protocol. She walked out of the building into sunlight. DC kept moving around her, cars, tourists, policemen, and no one knew what they'd just been saved from. But one person did, because he was waiting for her. Across the street, Dominic Vance, pressed coat, aviators, calm, calculated. He nodded like they were old friends meeting for lunch. Emma didn't reach for her weapon. Neither did he. They stood 5 feet apart on the sidewalk as the world blurred around them. "You disarmed it," he said. "You underestimated me." "No," he replied. "I was counting on it." That made her pause. "What do you mean?" He tilted his head. "If I wanted blood, I'd have picked another target. But I needed someone to validate the myth." Emma's jaw tightened. "You used me." "No," Vance said, smiling faintly. "I revealed you." Emma said nothing. He stepped closer. "The phoenix doesn't rise unless there's fire. I gave you fire. Now everyone knows you're real. You're a symbol. They'll study your tactics, train in your image. You'll be on every blueprint." She shook her head. "You think this is victory?" "I think," he said quietly, "you become exactly what they feared you'd be. A woman who doesn't flinch. Then why are you still standing?" "Because killing me would undo everything." He said, "You shoot me here, and I become a martyr. You walk away, and I stay a ghost." Emma's voice was calm. "I don't need to kill you, Dominic. I already exposed you. Homeland has your network. Your funding, your methods, it's over." Vance smiled. "That's what you think." He walked away, and Emma let him go, not because she couldn't stop him, but because stopping him wasn't the point anymore. She had won, not by pulling the trigger, but by refusing to become him. 2 days later, she sat beside David in the cabin. The snow outside was soft. The world felt still for once. He handed her a cup of coffee, then sat beside her on the couch. They said the threat was neutralized, he said, but they didn't say how. Emma looked down at her hands. I didn't fire a single shot. David watched her quietly. And that hurts? She nodded, because I used to think strength was measured in bullets. Now I know it's measured in restraint, and I don't know if I like that. David set his cup down. Emma, you've been fighting for a long time, not just out there. In here, he touched her chest. You're allowed to stop. She looked at him. I don't know how. You start by breathing. So she did, and for the first time in weeks. She exhaled without fear. Weeks passed. She declined the offers. Consulting, media interviews, book deals. She didn't want to be a brand. She wanted to be a person again. She and David traveled. Quietly off-grid, no press. She watched the news in silence when Vulture's wing was officially dismantled. High-level arrests, government hearings, public outrage. They called her a critical source, but never said her name. That was her only request. Let me go back to shadows. Just for a while, one spring morning, she stood on the edge of a forest. Trail, sunlight dappled through trees. Birds called in the distance. She held a letter in her hand. It was from Lieutenant Chan, short, just 3 lines. They're rebuilding, and we could use your eyes, if you're ready. Emma folded the letter, slipped it in her jacket. David was standing ahead on the trail. Waiting, he smiled. She smiled back and walked toward him. She didn't say yes, not yet. But the woman who walked through those trees wasn't hiding anymore. She was Emma Claire Mitchell. She was Phoenix. She was a wife, a protector, a former soldier, a future guide, and someone who finally understood. Real strength isn't found in uniform or rank or weapon. It's found in the moment you could have stayed silent and chose not to. The world wouldn't remember the dress or the AR-15 or the cathedral filled with gunmen. But someone would, someone who needed hope, someone who needed proof that quiet courage still exists. That dignity doesn't shout, it acts, and that's sometimes the most dangerous person in the room. Is the one who looks like they've already walked through hell and still came back whole.